Aloha, mahalo for joining Kukua Council's Honolulu Council District 7 Candidates Forum. I'm Lila Moore, President of the Kukua Council. Mahalo to my valued colleagues for their logistical support, Doug Matsuoka, Barbara Service, Rick Tabor, Lourdes Scheibert, who am I missing? Oh, and Helen Wagner, I'm so sorry. The Kukua Council is one of Hawaii's oldest advocacy organization. We engage those who are interested in shaping the future and the well-being of our community. As examples, in early March, weeks before Governor Ige issued stay-at-home orders, the Kukua Council held a press conference. We requested our local governments to address the pandemic and reveal their plans for older adults. Lieutenant Governor Josh Green and many other advocates for seniors participated in that conference. In April, with worldwide news that residents of nursing homes and long-term care facilities were among the most susceptible to COVID-19, the Kukua Council held a public conference with Hawaii's long-term care ombudsman, John McDermott. Ombudsmen from the neighbor islands also joined in, and all voiced their concerns about the vulnerability of local care home residents and their caregivers. In May, the Kukua Council held the first public Honolulu Mayoral Forum via Zoom. And despite technical glitches, there were nearly 2,000 views via Facebook and YouTube. In June, we started holding public forums for all of Honolulu's council districts. We started with District 1 and then had one for District 3, and last week it was for District 5. Today, we'll learn about the candidates for District 7. District 7 is probably Honolulu's most diverse community, covering the area from Kalihi, Iwilei, Kalihi-Kai, Mapunapuna, Salt Lake, Aliamanu, Hickam, Foster Village, Ford Island, and Sand Island. All candidates who filed their candidacy as of June 12 were invited to participate. The order in which candidates will speak was determined by their own application and filing dates. For most of you, this program will be in a watch and listen only mode. Everyone will be muted except the moderators. We're on the honor system here, and each candidate will unmute himself or herself when it is his or her turn to speak. There will be audible warnings to let the speaker know that it's time to wrap up. In the first round, the warnings will come at 30 seconds and at 15 seconds before the allotted time expires. With all other rounds, there will only be a 15-second warning. Then, although we don't want to be rude, but to be fair to all, when the allotted time expires, the candidate would be muted and the next candidate will be encouraged to speak. So let's begin this forum with the first rotation. We will hear from each candidate. In 3 minutes, please tell us who you are and why you think you should represent District 7 at the City Council. Jacob Aki, will you please start?
Aloha, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jacob Aki, and I was born and raised in the Kalihi area, a place where my family has lived for over 100 years. I attended the Kalihi Kai Elementary School before graduating from the Kamehameha School's Kapalama campus in 2013. I graduated with my undergrad from UH Manoa and a master's degree from the George Washington University, and I've been working at the Hawaii State Senate since 2016 as the Chief of Staff to Senate Majority Leader Kalani English, where I've had the great opportunity to work on many of our state's most pressing issues. I grew up in a low-income family, born in Merritt's housing, and grew up in Kamehameha homes. And growing up, I faced a lot of the socio-economic disparities that many in our families face every day. But I was fortunate that through education, I was able to overcome those challenges, and I became the first in my family to graduate from college. But really, working in state government for the past 4 years has really allowed me the opportunity to understand, what people in our community are going through every day, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. And as you stated, Council District 7 is one of the most diverse communities in the entire state. And for me is, I think what's really important is making sure that those in our community have the opportunity to live and thrive here in our islands. More importantly, giving our children the opportunity, because over the next couple of years, the next council members will have to deal with a lot of big, huge issues, things like rail, things like economic recovery. And I think we're going to need bold leadership moving forward. And I feel that my experience working at all levels of government, as a member of the neighborhood board, as a staffer in the Hawaii State Senate, working in Washington, D.C., as well as my advocacy work at the United Nations, I bring a unique perspective, one that's rooted in our community and one that I think will benefit our neighbors moving forward. But thank you folks for this opportunity, and I look forward to participating in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Radiant Cordero, you're next, please.
Hello, hi everyone. I want to give a shout out to the other candidates. I want to say hi to Jacob and Ryan. Thank you so much for your heart for our communities. And I want to thank the Kokua Council for allowing us to have this place as a forum to share who we are. So once again, my name is Radiant Cordero. I'm a candidate for Council District 7. I grew up in Kalihi. I live in Salt Lake, Moanalua, and I currently serve as the Chief of Staff to the current council member, Joey Manahan. I also served in the Hawaii State Legislature in the House of Representatives prior to working at the state legislature, as well as working in nonprofits dedicated to persons with disabilities, as well as employment and job retention, as well as for Keiki leadership development. Before that, I started working at an early age, doing yard work to money remittance, doing grocery, as well as just working in different small jobs. And that was what I knew. That's all I thought about, was working to survive and doing my best to go to school. And now, with this experience working in both the state legislature and at the city council, it is with that experience and also with that pulse of the community that I think it is with a collaborative and driven solutions that we come together as we go through this crisis, as well as we come out of this crisis. And I am ready to hit the ground running to support a safe reopening for our economy, as well as sustainable tourism, but also diversifying our industries, as well as to support our current industries with, creating more local jobs for our communities to support our current industries, if that makes sense. And that will hopefully help to make resilient jobs or a more sustainable cycle of jobs. I also want to support the building of more affordable and attainable housing where everyone at all incomes and all range of incomes are able to have a roof over their heads. And I want to support more homeless programs that address the root of the issues of our homeless programs. And I want to further work together with our communities to see how we can, just like those sustainable industries, make sustainable food systems in our communities, because I feel like Kalihi has the answer for a lot of our sustainable issues there. Also, I really want to work with our current and incoming council members. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Radiant. Ryan, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Mandato. I'm a school leader, former educator, former chairman of the Kalihi Palama Neighborhood Board, an advocate, and I'm running for City Council District 7. I'm running for City Council because people are dying, and I mean this literally. 2 years ago, a man was shot in front of Dillingham Foodland, and as a community, we questioned why that happened, and we had no response. In that same exact year, someone was shot twice in the head at my apartment because there was an illegal gambling room that the community knew about, that we shared with the police officers, and so nothing was done about it. And in these instances, I thought about, what does it mean to be a community leader? What does it mean to address the trauma that exists in communities, especially low-income communities? And I was just looking for someone to come out and say, this is enough. I'm running because I'm tired. I am frustrated at these current systems that continue to plague the communities, especially in Kalihi, that are going to impact our children. As a former special education teacher and someone who still works in schools, I see the issues every day that impact our children. The issues that we see at school are because of the specific systems and policies that exist in our city that have not been addressed. And I hope that in my particular leadership, that we can address these issues so that students and kids grow up in safe and thriving communities, and also to advocate for their families as well. As someone who was born and raised low income in Kalihi, um, I question why things haven't changed. At 15 years old, my house was raided. It was the largest drug bust raid in the entire state of Hawaii. And to think, fast forward 10 years, issues related to gang violence, to drugs, to gun violence still happen. And so when is the time that we're going to say enough? When is it time when all of our leaders are going to come together and say, we need to address poverty, we need to address situations in our community that are putting our people down? And that's why I'm running. I'm also running because I want to advocate for those who cannot even vote. Our district, if you look at it, we have a lot of immigrants, we have a lot of COFA migrants, and we have a lot of houseless individuals. And many of these people don't have the necessary privileges to vote. And so we need a leader who's going to advocate for these people. These people use our city resources every day, public transportation, our roads, everything. And so who is going to be their voice in city council? Ultimately, I hope to use my experience as an educator to bring an equity mindset. We need leaders who are going to advocate for those furthest from opportunity. If we advocate for our most vulnerable populations, we can advocate for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan. All right, candidates, just to remind you for the next round of questions, and there's going to be approximately 16 questions, you have 1 minute to answer. And you're going to get you'll receive an audible warning 15 minutes before your allotted time expires. So this rotation is the first in that series of 16 questions. Each candidate, starting with Radiant Cordero, has 1 minute to answer a question posed by Barbara Service. Barbara?
Hello. Hi, I'm Barbara Service. I'm a member of AARP and Cocoa Council, of course, and also the Policy Advisory Board for Elder Affairs. And my question is, what are you going to do to help contain the costs of the rail? I'm sorry, Lila, who's the first?
First person to answer your question would be Radiant Cordero.
Okay, thanks, Radiant.
Hi, Barbara. Great question. Thank you so much. I have worked on the last budget or the last two budgets for the rail, and every instance we saw the impacts of the lack of oversight that the council or even that the taxpayers have on rail because of its semi-autonomous standing. For me, I would like to see an immediate change. If I could have done it already, I would have to see the oversight change, whether it be through charter or through how the council, or not the council, but the HART board operates. Because right now, and granted, I know that they're voluntary, but they need more oversight, and the council and the taxpayers need to provide that oversight immediately. They are able to, yes, and we are able to do that through possible changes in that manner. And I can talk about it more later. Thank you.
Radiant. All right, Ryan, your answer, please.
Sorry, Barbara, can you repeat the question?
Barbara?
Sorry, I had to get back in there. I'm wondering what you would do to help contain the costs of the rail.
First, I think we need to solidify the particular relationship that we have with the federal government. I do believe that we need to ensure that this rail project is complete. I strongly believe that public transportation is a social justice issue, which is why I completely support the rail. In regards to revenue changes, we need to look and diversify in terms of looking at how we can develop revenue as a city to ensure that particular projects within the rail line are completed. One way is by increasing property taxes for second family homes purchased by foreign investments. And if we can tap into that particular network that's currently not being tapped into, we can look at how much money we can increase and our revenue to support rail development. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Jacob, you're up next.
Hi. I too think that there needs to be greater oversight on HART and the HART board. I think a lot of the issues that we've seen in recent years has been transparency and accountability issues on HART's behalf. So like I said, I too think that there really needs to be greater oversight. And I also believe that there's some funding mechanisms that we need to satisfy with some of the current some of the concerns that the FTA has at the federal level. So I think it's really multi-layered, and as Radiant said, we could sit here all day and talk about where rail went wrong. But I do think that the main thing is that there needs to be greater accountability, greater transparency, and greater oversight on how our tax dollars are being spent on this project. Mahalo.
Thank you, Jacob. All right, well, this rotation gives each candidate, starting with Ryan, 1 minute to answer another question from Barbara. Barbara, when you speak, could you speak a little bit louder, please?
Okay, how's that? Does
Good.
that sound okay? Okay, good. My next question is about how do you feel about the development of luxury homes or luxury apartments in Kaka'ako?
All right, Ryan, you're up first.
I definitely need to think about making decisions for a particular community that I don't live in, but I would want to encourage the community of Kaka'ako to speak in terms of what do we need to do as a city council to ensure that when housing is developed, we put necessary policies in place so that people with a mixed range of incomes can access those housing opportunities. In regards to the luxury development, this is where it comes in. I want to know who are these luxury developers and what is your stake in ensuring that the development of particular buildings are going to satisfy the community needs. And so if that is in terms of regulating kind of the property taxes that these people are paying, or what is their stake in the community development to ensure that those furthest from opportunity have access to these buildings.
Thank you very much. All right, Jacob, you're up.
I wouldn't say that I am entirely opposed to the development of luxury homes, but I think that first and foremost, there needs to be a priority of developing affordable housing and something that's truly affordable for local families. While I wouldn't want to speak for Kaka'ako, as that's not the community that I'm hoping to represent, I do think that across the board, we need to have a harder look at how can we use rail and the TOD development as an opportunity to address our affordable housing need. There's going to be 22 rail stations, and there's an opportunity there to develop real affordable housing options. Like I said, I'm not opposed to luxury development, but I do think that the main priority needs to be affordable housing for local people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. All right, Radiant, you're up next.
Thank you, and that's a great question. And like I mentioned earlier in my last question, I mentioned how we need to provide housing for the full range of income levels, from $0 to however much income. And our city is growing, and we need to ensure that everyone is included in this growth. And luxury homes is not made for everyone. And I want to make sure that on the council that we ensure that there is citywide, countywide access to this affordable, but also high quality housing and home ownership. Because like many of us here, I'm sure that, renting, I'm a renter, and many of us will still continue to struggle to find or afford places to live. And this will have to change with the amount of I guess, characteristics of housing that we provide. And that's through investments and more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Radiant. All right. This rotation gives each candidate, starting with Jacob Aki, 1 minute to answer Dale Head's question. Dale?
Hey, hello there. Aloha. See, I am a retired federal employee from Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. And previous to that, I worked at the Navy Supply Center. On occasion, I worked in the Red Hill Underground Fuel Storage Facility, which consists of 20 huge tanks, each one large enough to enclose Aloha Tower. They're big. The Navy discovered and reported in 2014 that 27,000 gallons of fuel had leaked from their tank number 5 into surrounding lava rock, which could and may have migrated to the Halava water aquifer, which serves 25% of urban Honolulu. Question: as a representative of residents of this community, what will you do with the Board of Water Supply and Red Hill Task Force to stay on top of this potential threat to our drinking water? And it appears this Red Hill Task Force has not met since last November. Thank you.
Jacob, you're up.
First and foremost, I think, we need to make sure that these discussions are being had, and that we stay on top of this issue. I think first and foremost, protecting our natural resources, more so ensuring that we have access to clean and safe water is important, being that we are, that the Red Hill fuel tank is in our district, is, making sure that we as a community and we as a county government stay on top of this major issue. I think it's also going to be working with the federal government. I think being that we're working with the military and understanding that, the bureaucracies and just the massive department that we're working in, I think it's going to take a community to really stand up and demand that this issue is being addressed in a timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Radiant, you're up.
Thank you so much for that question. We live where I live very close to where the aquifers are, and that issue is very close to not just the Red Hill communities, but our whole county's issues and heart. So I feel that I support the Board of Water Supply's proposals, as well as working and keeping up with the Navy's contracted work, but also I would want them to relocate the tanks above ground sooner than what they've proposed. And I think that, I don't know if you've seen the news either in San Diego or so, that we've seen of 2 or so of those tanks, of similar tanks like our Red Hill tanks, already relocated in a shorter amount of time than we are looking to relocate our tanks. So can we learn from their best practices? And I think that we can, and as a community, we should hold them accountable in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Radiant. Ryan, you're up, please.
Thank you for the question, Dale. I completely am in support of ensuring that these tanks are handled. As someone who is part of the neighborhood board system, it's something that we've been pushing on a resolution basis within each neighborhood board to try and ensure that the military does its part to protect our waters. And this is something that I'm trying to investigate as someone who wants to be on city council, the relationship between county and federal government. Because in our district, we have Hickam Air Force Base and Ford Island, and I can't access them because I don't have a military, military membership or someone who is in the military. And so these issues come convoluted when you're trying to, address particular issues between federal and city politics. And so, but one thing that I do know for sure is that the military is saying they have a couple more years before they can build anything necessary. And it's a, what do you call that? A series of national security threats, which is why they're not going to move it. But I think if we come together and advocate as a community, we can ensure that these particular tanks get addressed, because I do not want our waters to be polluted.
All right, thank you very much, Ryan. All right, this next rotation gives each candidate, starting with Radiant Cordero, 1 minute to answer Doug Matsuoka.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for participating. I'm H. Doug Matsuoka. I'm with Hawaii Meals on Wheels and also Hawaii Guerrilla Video Hui. This question comes in part from my own experience with homelessness in 2014, not too long ago. And my question is this: given that last year 7,000 people on Oahu became homeless, what can you do to prevent people from becoming homeless? Thank you.
All right,
Thank
Radiant.
you. Oh, thank you for that question, Doug. So I'm a huge proponent for not using blanket approaches. Blanket approaches do not help a wide facet of or majority of issues. So what we must do is make sure that, they say, show me your budget, show me your priorities. I think our priorities should be focused on allocating the different roots of issues, and that whether it be foster children or foster youth that need assistance, people who, I could go into examples and more of the like, but it's investing in those, and then investing to make sure that people have shelter, because we can either have a job, have a family, or live alone. But the main thing to get stability is to have shelter. So investing in housing first initiatives.
Thank you, Radiant. All right, Ryan, you're next.
Thank you. As an educator, this issue is particularly close to my heart as someone who has worked with houseless individuals and currently work with houseless individuals and trying to come back into a comfortable living. So one solution I think we need to do, especially in low-income communities, is think about what the city can provide in regards to financial literacy programs. In addition to having a housing crisis, that's one aspect of it. But I do think we have a rent crisis. And people are not, the reason why people are moving into houseless situations is because of their inability to pay for rent. It is a systemic issue. It does trickle down, but I think we need to beef up our specific policies in place to ensure that we provide low-income families with financial literacy programs.
Thank you very much. Jacob, you're next.
I think we need a multifaceted approach, and there's no one size fits all solution. For me, when I look at the homeless issue, I look at the diversity of the homeless population. You have those who suffer from mental illness. You have those that suffer from drug abuse. You have those who have just been chronically homeless for the past 20 years. And then you have those who are families and working people. And our traditional approach of throwing money at the issue, putting them in shelters, doesn't solve the issue. We need a long-term solution, and our solutions are going to vary by the population that we are working with. People who suffer from mental illness or those who suffer from drug abuse, you can put them in shelters, you can put them in homes, doesn't mean that they're gonna succeed. Those people need a rehabilitation type program. So I think our approach to homelessness needs to match the subset of the homeless population that we are working with. So I think our traditional approach hasn't been working, and we need to be innovative.
All right, thank you, Jacob. This rotation gives each candidate, starting with Ryan Nandaro, 1 minute to answer Gary Simon.
Thank you, Lida, and thank you, candidates. I'm Gary Simon. I'm with AARP Hawaii and the Hawaii Family Caregiver Coalition. And my question is, what is your position on replacing Aloha Stadium and redeveloping its site? Please, Ryan, you're first.
I definitely think Aloha Stadium is an opportunity to build our particular economy. So I support the revamp of this specific development. I'm curious as to how we're going to continuously fund it and work with our state legislator to ensure that the appropriate necessary developments happen and how it's going to be used and impact the community.
All right, thank you very much, Ryan. Jacob, you're next.
I think the Aloha Stadium Entertainment Project, like other TOD development provides an opportunity to address, major issues like affordable housing. But while I do support the overall intent and the vision that the project has and the potential benefits that it can bring to our community, I've spent hours with people in Foster Village and people in Lower Halava who have questions on whether there's the tech infrastructure capability, whether there's going to be continued impact in their own communities, because as we all know, when there's a football game, when there's a concert, people are parking in Foster Village, people are parking in Lower Halava. There is noise pollution that affects nearby residents. So as we look to populate the area, I think there needs to be further discussions with the residents there, but I do support the project.
Thank you, Jacob. Radiant, you're next.
I support the Aloha Stadium redevelopment, and it is an opportunity that I think that we must take to really revamp the foundation of the growth of our city, especially in that area from our infrastructure to, it is right near Pearl Harbor, where we must take into account our climate change at our local level. There we have Halava Stream, where the capacity has the potential for flooding. So the mitigation of that as well, which we at the council have supported, as well as supporting safer streets in that area. I was down there just 2 weeks ago when someone was hit and killed on Kamehameha Highway. So how can we make these streets safer and with our multimodal infrastructure, stream management, road and sidewalk rehabilitation, and also how can we make sure that we invest in affordable housing for our local residents there. Thank you.
Thank you, Radiant. All right, starting with Jacob Aki, candidates have 1 minute to answer Kathy Wyatt's question.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm a little slow on the uptake there. My question is near and dear to my heart. I am founder and president of Ha'oli Hawaii, which is an adult daycare center. I'm also on the policy advisory board for elder affairs, Hawaii Family Caregiver Coalition, and of course the Cocoa Council. But my question to you is, there are it's a statement first. There are very few centers for Kapuna in District 7, especially adult daycare centers. What would you do to promote the development of centers for the Kapuna? Thank you.
Jacob, you're up first.
I think for me, this is a particular issue that's really close to me as I help to take care of my aging grandparents. And as you said, there are a lack of kupuna daycare centers within our district. And I think one of the first things we need to do is to work with our community healthcare partners to see if there is capacity to do so. I think there is a strong need to have places for our kupuna to go, because for someone like me who takes care of my grandparents, I have to work during the day, and I think providing these types of accommodations is very useful. So I think first and foremost is working with our community healthcare partners to evaluate if they have the capacity, and if not, how can we further assist them and support them in building that capacity to provide that very much needed service to families in our district. Mahalo.
All right, thank you, Jacob. Radiant, you're up next.
So I am a major proponent of aging in place, and a lot of that encourages safer communities as well as community centers. And I have had the opportunity throughout my service in local government, but especially in my service in nonprofit organizations, to work with our kapuna. Our kapuna are wanting to remain independent and also to utilize the resources that they have. So that is investing in the programs with our city, through our city budget, which we can do through our city budget to support them. And I think that we can start planning through the different aspects from our TOD through our programs for food and more. So thank you very much for that question.
Thank you, Radiant. Ryan, you're next.
Thank you, Kathy, for the question. I think when we look at sustainable development for the particular community, when you look at what's not there, you see why a community hurts. And so because our district doesn't have a lot of kupuna centers, I think one of the things we need to look at is where in our community can we start implementing these development projects. And in those development projects, we work with agencies who want to develop those particular homes or centers, and then create a streamlined process for them to navigate the building process that is going to be sustainable, that's going to provide jobs, and also going to support the community. And so it's a really collaborative effort that I think needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, this next rotation starts with Radiant. You have 1 minute to answer another question from Taffy Wyatt.
This question probably should have come first, but if you're elected, what is the first thing you want to do when you get into office? What is your top priority?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
You can hear me? You can't hear me? Oh,
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you not hear me?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, can you repeat that again, please? I apologize.
Sure. If you are elected to this office, what is your top priority? The first thing you want to do when you get into the office, besides put your stuff up?
So first and foremost, this office is a community office, and I see it as a community liaison and beyond anything else, because before we even, when we start to address coming out of this pandemic and coming through with recovery, is to improve our community engagement processes by establishing platforms for more efficient government and communication through information technology and collaboration. Because for me right now, there are, and working in city government currently, and also before in state government, there are antiquated systems that make up our city government. And if we come together and find a unified system where all of our neighbors, everyone of all abilities, capabilities, and availabilities can utilize our city government or local government in general, then we can have a more participatory and engaged electorate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Radiant. All right, Ryan, your answer, please.
If elected, the first thing that I want to do is eliminate illegal gambling rooms. And that's a really big topic, but it's something that is near and dear to my heart, but also a lot of community members, is what do we need to do to come up with community-driven solutions to help HPD as well as Vice Squad to address the particular illegal gambling rooms that exist. The community knows where they exist. Why is it taking so long to ensure that we cancel them and close them out? So that's one thing that I'm going to do. One of the first things that I'm going to do and try to address if elected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Jacob, your answer, please.
I think for me, one of the first things I would want to accomplish is really rebuilding trust with our elected officials. As I've spent the last year walking the district and speaking with thousands of residents, and especially now during this COVID-19 pandemic, people feel that there isn't trust within our government system. So for me, I think one of the first things we need to do before we roll out any major policy plans is to make sure that the people that voted to represent us have the trust and faith that we can do the job to move our state and move our communities forward. Because as we've seen in recent polls, most people don't have trust or faith within our government. And I think to build ourselves out of this COVID-19 pandemic, we're going to have to get their trust back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. This next rotation starts with Ryan Mandato, and you have 1 minute to answer this question from Lourdes Scheibert.
Hi, welcome to Cocoa Council. Thank you for being here. My name is Lourdes Scheibert. I'm a volunteer director at Cocoa Council, and I also serve as a director on my condominium association. We moved to Kakoako in 1997 for a project in energy efficiency and conservations for Schofield Barracks. In 1998, we were awarded the Island Business Magazine Small Company of the Year, along with recognition from the Federal Energy Award and publication in Energy User News. Being in Oahu for this long in the energy business, I have seen the condition of the infrastructure throughout Oahu. My question, the current mayor focused upon infrastructure improvements. However, our roads, water and sewer systems, public transportation, lack of curbs and sidewalks are still problematic. How will you solve this?
Thank you, Lourdes, and thank you for your work in energy. It's something that we need to have, especially in the Kalihi community. I'm a strong advocate for sustainable development. Why do low-income communities don't have those necessary access to sustainable efforts? I lived on a street that didn't have any recycling, and I can't believe that's still happening in 2020. So that, first of all, that needs to be addressed. Second of all, I think the necessary developments in regards to roads and public transportation, there is a revenue shortfall in that particular area. So once again, going back to the idea of how do we raise revenue, and if we use that concept of increasing property taxes for foreign investment, that could solve some of our smaller development projects. But I think overall we need to have an equity mindset when creating development projects. How can we ensure low-income communities have those development projects first? Because if we can address low-income communities, we can address all communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Jacob, you're next.
Roads is one of the biggest issues that many people in our districts face, particularly in the Kalihi area. And from a policy perspective, part of the reason that is because of an issue called roads and limbos, that it's private roads where a owner cannot be determined. So many of these roads have gone unmaintained for decades, with both the state and the county pointing fingers, not me, not me. I think that finger pointing needs to stop. When you look at many of these private roads in our district, many of those roads are adjoined by city roads. So for me, one of the first things I do is to stand up and say, let's stop pointing fingers. And if all of these adjoining roads are city roads, that we work with the state to somehow find a way that, yes, city can take jurisdiction, but we need help financially, because it's unfair that many of these roads have gone unmaintained for decades. And every time it rains, people in our community have to live with flooding, have to live with knee-high potholes. So I do think that's one major issue that we need to address. And I think with rail coming through, we have an opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Radiant, you're next.
Absolutely. And both of them hit it on the nail on the head. And I know that along with that, the balance of growth with our public infrastructure encompasses all of that. And the foundation, our infrastructure, will only just support or not support our housing, transportation, roads, preservation of our environment, and the fight against climate change. And what we can then do is make sure that we look at it, and in Brian's favorite word, equitable standpoint, where we see a lot of these processes involving these communities where they say that this is the issue, this is how we want our environment to thrive, and reallocating those funds to do it. I think also we saw that during this pandemic that the construction industry has kind of helped sustain our economy from really hitting its lowest of lows. So I have a really drawn out plan that would help assign the road of pavement by assessments and numbers, and so that we can do it by vehicle miles per hour, vehicle miles per, not vehicle miles, but how many vehicles pass through it. But the more that we are able to plan for roads to be deteriorated and plan for when they are able to be paved, then we can also better budget for those in our community. So it's pretty antiquated, and I look forward to working with more people on how to really get that out.
All right, thank you very much, Radiant. This next rotation starts with Jacob Aki. In 1 minute, please answer Rick Tabor's question.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. Listening to you, I have no idea which one of you I'd vote for. You're all great. So I actually started out here in Hawaii in 1976, stationed at Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station as a Navy hospital field corpsman. and married somebody from here, and we've been here for a very, very long time. I'm in the Rotary, and part of our Rotary recently, we worked with RILA, the Rotary Youth Leadership Awards, and we had Sustainable Coast come out and Coastline come out and teach the kids, but also us, about microplastics in our environment. My wife and I are also very active with HPR and NPR, and we attended a forum where they had a national climate assessment being presented. And they talked about that we're probably going to overheat before we go underwater, and just the risk of our climate. Now, we've touched on this a little bit, definitely in the last question, but our question is for you is, what will you do to try to help your district around the ecosystem and improving for our climate? And we're going to start with, yeah, go ahead.
I think one of the things that we need to do is oftentimes from a policy perspective, we're looking out for the answers. Here in Hawaii, we should be looking in. Our kupuna here in Hawaii were the greatest land stewards. They were the greatest land managers. And I think we need to bring our indigenous knowledge to the forefront of how we deal with climate change, how we deal with natural resource management. I've had the opportunity to travel to places like Majuro in the Republic of the Marshall Islands, or into Pohnpei in the Federated States of Micronesia, where our Pacific brothers and sisters are experiencing climate change at a rate so fast that many of them are looking at relocating their countries. So I think here in Hawaii, we have time, but we need the political will, and we need to invest. Within our district, we look at the Salt Lake area. Traditionally, those were all fish ponds. So underneath there is salt water moving through. So how do we better plan? Because we can continue paving those roads, but if those roads are going to be underwater in the next 30 years, then we might need to look at different alternatives. But I really do think it's really analyzing our current infrastructure and better planning moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Radiant, you're next.
I always say, to all my friends, this district, a lot of it has been man-made, and especially like our airport and more. And our district has the most to lose from climate change because of how much it's man-made, and the land will take back what was once hers. And with all that, I keep thinking like how much of our district is going to be underwater, and all of those families that will suffer are some of the people who are most underserved. And with that, I believe that we need to build for climate resilience, whether it be through changing codes to build more climate ready homes or buildings, and provide more work at the forefront, but less, so that we won't have to be saving our communities. And I will be a champion for climate, as well as I've done when I did draft Bill 40 in this current office that I serve in, and I won't waver from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Radiant. Ryan?
Thank you for the question. It starts in the classroom. And as someone who is a teacher, I think we need to really educate our up and coming generation about the impacts of climate change in their community. And when we're looking at helping children in Kalihi and Salt Lake, they need to investigate, to what Jacob said, kind of what is in the environment and what did we do to prevent that environment from going in the direction that it needs to be. But when you're looking at it from a policy level, we need to once again go back to sustainable development and equity. And when we look at our communities, we don't have bike lanes, we don't have easy access to transportation in particular areas. And so if a community doesn't have these things, how do we encourage our community members to then participate in sustainable practices when they don't have the access to doing that? I gave up my car, I'm riding the bus from Kalihi to Eva Beach every day, that's where I work. And we can make these small changes, but in order for these small changes to happen, we need to provide the access. So we need to create those sustainable developments in our communities before we can encourage this change.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, this rotation starts with Radiant Cordero and brings us to Dale Head's question. Dale?
Aloha. Good to see you folks. Yeah, I resided in a Waianae condo complex for the past 35 years. And I spent over a decade on our board of directors, okay? Today, about half of our Oahu population reside in homeowner association rural projects, which lack both transparency and accountability. Efforts by condo residents to clean this up at the legislature are always opposed by property management industry lobbyists. Our current city council members do not regard it as a problem for them, insisting that these problems are under state jurisdiction. Thus, residents who reside in these properties bounce between local government departments seeking help but receive none. Question: as the city council, via Department of Planning and Permitting, grants permission for developers to build these huge condominium towers, what can you do as a council member to ensure democracy and accountability in these projects? And any clues to what percentage of residents in your district live in condos? Thank you.
All right,
Absolutely. Oh, okay. Famously, one of our neighborhood board members in the Salt Lake neighborhood board, where I currently live, I'm in an apartment. They say that 1% of our city and county of Honolulu lives just on two streets, on Alalima and Likini. So they are just one street over away from me. So if that says anything, that's quite a lot of people in apartments / condos. And I believe that that's a good point, that people do feel that, and I know that Ryan and Jacob, just as myself, met with the Honolulu Board of Realtors today. And we do think of it as a state issue, but it doesn't have to be. And Jacob also mentioned this earlier, that a lot of the whole pointing fingers, a lot of these stakes in issues, a lot of the issues that we have stakes in are don't have to be city and state issues. These are unsurpassed management issues that we can address, not just at Department of Planning and Permitting, but also along with our Department of Community Services, where a lot of our housing services are managed as well. So we can do that at the city. The city can adapt. We've seen it through this pandemic and more. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you, Radiant. Ryan, you're next.
Thank you for the question, Dale. A simple way in the policy adjustment is to ensure that the city council creates stipulations in place when applying for planning and permitting in regards to condos, that the stipulations with the contract between developers and the city is that they need to put a clause or something within before the approval of that permit, that they're going to create democratic systems between homeowners in the condos and the developers to ensure that these things happen. It's something, as someone who I currently sit on neighborhood board 14, which is Liliha, Alava Heights, and Pu'unui, that this is an issue that happens in this particular area, where people in Liliha are facing a lot of development projects. And the stipulations I ask is what are the necessary steps the city council can put in regard to developers, and it's this agreement. And if you have that agreement with community members, then it's going to make it possible for people who live in condos to share their voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Jacob, your answer, please.
I also think that, both Ryan and Radiant really hit that issue on the head. I've over the past couple of months, I've been working with folks from the Kokea Gardens apartments in Kalihi regarding a issue that they had with their homeowners association. And part of the issue was that, they were given a 1 month notice that their maintenance fees was going to be increased by about 15 to 20%. And for many people, raising maintenance fees that much, it equals to about $75 to $100. These days, every dollar counts. And when I talked with them, what I realized was that their board failed to follow sunshine law. Their board failed to notify them when their meetings were. Their board failed to let them know that these issues were being voted on. So while I do think that it shouldn't be a state or city issue, it should be a government issue. Part of the things that I think we need to do is educate our homeowners, because our condo owners, because many of them are immigrants, many of them do not speak English, and many of them don't know their rights. So I think, from a city perspective, is making sure that they understand what they are entitled to, what their rights are, and working with them on these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob. All right, this rotation starts with Ryan, and you have 1 minute to answer Doug Matsuoka.
Hi guys, I'm back. And you know, a decade ago, I was director of technology for Honolulu Board of Realtors. I heard you mention them already. Anyway, I was a different person, so you know. My question is this: your district is comprised of several very distinct and different populations with different needs. You have an established multi-generational local population. You have both sheltered and unsheltered homeless communities. You have recent immigrants from the Pacific and Asia and the military living next to each other. How do you prioritize city services among them? And I believe it.
Thank you, Doug. I don't know if I would say how would I prioritize. I know who I would advocate for, and I would definitely advocate once again for those furthest from opportunity, low-income families who use our city resources the most. And so when we talk about city resources like public transportation or social services, you see that there's a large proportion of COFA migrants, recent immigrants, and houseless individuals who access these supports and services. I think what needs to come into place is how do we come together as a community to talk about if we are in a stable living situation, what can I do to advocate for someone across the street or a couple roads down who might not have that opportunity? And you see that it's so unique in this particular district where there are those who are living comfortably and then those who are not. And so how do we bridge those two together and then ensure that when we talk to neighbors that they advocate those furthest from opportunity?
Thank you very much, Ryan. Jacob, you're next.
You know, I've been a big advocate, and I've always said that government cannot solve all of these issues by themselves. It's going to take community, it's going to take residents, it's going to take government working together to solve all of these issues. And I'm a firm believer that no one should be turned away just because they're a COFA migrant. No one should be turned away just because they aren't a resident, and that we should have equal access to many of these services that can help uplift everybody. If we uplift our lowest populations, we can uplift everybody. But we do have the challenge that we work with a diverse population, and I think it's working with the community partners as a mediator to help provide some of these services. For example, some of the COFA migrants, I've been working with the consulates from the Republic of the Marshall Islands as well as the Federated States of Micronesia to reach out to our COFA migrants, many of them who can't speak English, on many of these issues during this COVID-19 pandemic. But in short, I think it's really working with our community partners and from government providing the support that they need. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Radiant, you're up next.
Yes, so along to add to and not repeat what the great responses from my fellow candidates is that the fact is that the people who are able to take the time are able to have the luxury to come out and either complain or lift up these or bring up these issues are because they have that luxury to do so. So community engagement is oftentimes project specific or issue specific. And a lot of the time when projects or issues come up, it takes a long time to arrive at a consensus or conceptual design that matches the needs and priorities at the community level. I think that one, it should take a long time to outreach to every single person. And I'm sure my fellow candidates know I love to say this, abilities, and capabilities, but it shouldn't come from a project standpoint. It should come from a transactional relationship with these neighbors and make sure it is resourced properly, make it participatory, and that these projects or any issues brought up is generated at the community level. And that comes from how we engage and support these community boards, neighborhood boards, associations, and however people want to address their issues. So just to add on to that. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Radiant. All right, this rotation starts with Jacob Aki, and you have 1 minute to answer Gary Simon.
Thank you again, Lila and candidates. my question is, in 3 years, by the end of 2023, which kupuna policies and programs will you have improved in the city and county of Honolulu? And how will you have improved those kupuna policies and programs? Please, Jacob.
I think that's a important question. I think first and foremost, we need to make sure that the programs and policies that we have in place stay in place, especially during a time where we are looking to cut government services and government spending. The most recent budget showed that we're allocating about 17 million to the Division of Elderly Affairs. And my hope is that by the end of 2023, we expand the amount that we are spending, because as this COVID-19 pandemic has shown, and is that especially during these times, one of the most vulnerable populations is our kupuna. So one of my hopes is that we can increase the amount of funding and services that we offer them, but also maybe looking at how do we maintain the real property tax exemption for kupuna who are aged 65 and plus. As the cost of living goes up, many of our kupuna who live on fixed incomes, their income doesn't fluctuate with the increase of the cost of living. So working to ensure that we have policies and we have services in place to help our kupuna adjust to these cost of living increases, while also making sure that they have quality access to the services that they need. Mahalo.
All right. Thank you, Jacob. Radiant, you're next.
Thank you. Along like Jacob, aging in place or taking care of our elders is a place that's close to my heart. I can't think of the English word right now, but my ninang, my godmother, owns a daycare here just up the street from me here, and she tells me every single day how important it is that we have these resources available for our community. And so I mentioned earlier how important aging in place is for our community. And it's not even just for our residents now, but especially for our residents now, but also how we prioritize our community in general. So the significant resources for our society is ability and to get to these resources, and that's transportation and supporting services in our meals and making sure that people are able to have safe cleaning and respite for caregiving. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Radiant. Ryan, you're next.
Thank you. One of the or not one, but multiple issues that I think I'm going to advocate for or will advocate for is how we address particular programs that impact elders with disabilities. Once again, I was a former special education teacher, so we work with Abilities Unlimited, other social service agencies, the Handy Van, to ensure that these programs are in place to get our kupuna with disabilities and necessary supports and services needed. I'm going to strongly advocate for no cuts to funding for handy vans. And this was on my platform, which was free public transportation. People have questioned me in regards to how we're going to make that happen, but it's something that I'm going to stick to. Once again, public transportation is a social justice issue, and a lot of our kupuna ride the bus, and hopefully the rail. So what can we do to ensure that this happens? But in regards to services for kupuna with disabilities, as well as handy van services, that's a top priority for me in regards to addressing issues related to this population. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. All right, this rotation starts with Radiant and in response to Rick Tabor's question.
Okay. Hi again, you guys. You guys are doing great. So our question coming up here is about what would you do to streamline city operations? And we'll start with you, Radiant.
Thank you so much for that question. As I mentioned earlier, I believe in the beginning of the chat that we're having here, is that there are antiquated systems between intergovernmental agencies, as well as how our community engages with our government. And right now there are about, I can name maybe 4 to maybe even 6 systems that we submit these queries, these requests, and more. What I think we could do is make sure and our IT guys have been focusing on studying the best antiquated system or unified system to do so is making sure that we invest in that and make sure that we properly train everyone in our city government, as well as make sure that we properly educate and make sure it's widely available for all of our neighbors, no matter if they are able to just call on the phone or are able to do it through letter or whatnot. I believe that we can also save money through that, because right now we are investing so much in those 4 to 6 systems or softwares that we have. And I hope that we can get there. That is a priority of mine, because right as we're coming out of this pandemic, oh, we need to save money. Thank you.
Thank you, Radiant. Ryan, your answer, please.
City services, how do we streamline that? Very interesting question. When I think of it, I think of the DMV for some reason, only because I had to pay $8 for using a card instead of paying cash. And so when I look at those particular systems, I'm like, why do these systems exist? It's 2020. Our infrastructure needs to improve in regards to data and management of particular processing and permitting. If we can allow for electronic systems to be in place and then support our workers in knowing how to navigate those systems, it could definitely streamline our processes. I'm not saying eliminate, our workers, because I'm a strong union supporter, but I think our workers need that professional development and training as well. And I don't think they're getting it from particular administrations within the city to ensure that they are supported in the job they need to access the services for all people. So, yeah.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Jacob, you're up.
I agree with both of them. I really think that we need to improve our government technology infrastructure as shown during the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, with the unemployment system, we were operating on a system that was over 15 years old. So I think one of the things that we need to do, and what's currently being done right now, I think at all levels of government, is working to see where we can upgrade and improve current technology processes. I think one of the departments I think really needs to implement this is the Department of Planning and Permitting. In their most recent audit, it was shown that they have the capabilities to implement a more efficient process via a new IT platform, but the issue was not having people trained on how to use it. So I think part of the things that we need to do is take a step back and see where we can implement immediately, where we need to improve on. Because I think as we move forward, this isn't going to be the first time we're going to face a pandemic like this. So we really need to ready ourselves and move everything online while ensuring that government operates as efficient as it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. All right, this rotation starts with Ryan Mandato. Please answer in 1 minute Kathy Wyatt's question.
Hi, Ryan. You had mentioned earlier that there's a lack of faith in our elected officials. And my question is, how will you help to restore faith in the city prosecutor's office and the police department? And what do you think about the idea of defunding the police?
I support defunding the police. And what that means is that we invest in programs such as social services and other agencies to ensure that we don't need to criminalize poverty. And that's exactly what's happening in Kalihi, that we are telling houseless people that they're criminals and other people that are definitely targeted based on their race. I definitely think there needs to be a way on how we can bridge those communications, as well as give current police officers the voice to share on how to do their job more safely and more effectively. When I was on the city, the neighborhood board, I always asked the police officers, what do you think we can do to make your job easier? Or what supports do you need? And they always said, I don't know. Or like they said, I don't know, that's not my jurisdiction, which I understand, but you play a particular role in that job. And so how do we get police officers to contribute to the policy development with the city council and the commission to ensure that they feel supported in the job that they need to, which is to protect our community members?
Thank you, Ryan. Jacob, your answer, please.
I'll be honest, I don't like that term defund the police, because when you really look at it, we're not really saying to defund the police. We're saying let's invest more into community programs. So I think that's something that we definitely need to do, is we need to start, and we got to get to these kids at a young age. And that's why I really appreciate the work that Ryan does as a teacher, because if we can get these kids early, we can set them on a better path forward. But I don't think defunding the police is the answer. I think we need to be providing more support to the police, because when you look at the areas and the beats in our district, historically they've been understaffed, right? So issues like abandoned vehicles, parking, and other minor issues, they get pushed to the back burner, because as we've seen in our district, there's larger and more violent crimes that they have to tend to. So I think we should better support the police. But I do think we need to have the conversation about what is the police commission's role, and that's something that I think we can do on the council. Because to change the scope of what the police commission does, we need to amend the Honolulu charter. So I think these are all great conversations that we need to be having, and a timely one that I think moving forward, no matter who gets on the council, these are conversations and issues that they will need to address in the short term. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Radiant, your response, please.
First off, I have been a long time participant and volunteer with our Neighborhood Security Watch and Citizens Patrol groups, and worked very closely with our community policing teams. But also, I grew up very afraid of the police and seeing my brothers treated unjustly by officers as well. And so it is a balance of whether or not whether we, like Jacob said, are having them respond to an array of, I guess, problems that are coming up, and if police force of action is necessary. So when I asked fellow officers that I worked really closely with on how we can help them, just like Ryan asks them in his public forum, they say, and they agree with the chief, that they have way too much responsibility, and what they can do. And what I asked them, would you be okay if I were to reallocate so that it is community driven and community based solutions? If we empower our neighborhood security watch groups and community policing groups, which also start at, like Jacob said, at the elementary level, at the middle school level. And I think that's what it should be. Police can have a role, and it can be a role in concert and parallel to the growth of our community. So that's how and also for the prosecuting attorney's office, I feel that there are just just like Hart, there are, and this is through the city budget standpoint, where there are ways that we need to find better oversight over that office as well, through their programs, through everything that they do, pretty much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Starting with Jacob Aki, please answer in 1 minute Lourdes Scheibert's question.
Thank you so much for being here today. I mean, this has been so refreshing, informative, enjoyable. I've written down several words for it. This next question is for starting with Jacob, and it's a question very near and dear to my heart. So your district includes Salt Lake, which has many thousands of condominium apartments. While the state has oversight of the condos, the city and county's Department of Planning and Permitting plays an important part, because most condo owners' complaints center around neglect or deferred maintenance of their buildings. Recently, because of Marco Polo fire, the city became more involved with the maintenance of these multi-family structures. What are your thoughts on the development of an ombudsman office to assist condo owners with the city and county's Department of Planning and Permitting? Thank you.
I totally support that, because as was stated many times, the area of Salt Lake, if my last count was correct, there's over 52 apartments slash condos. So you have a large number of people who are living in these buildings, and many of these buildings were built in the 70s and 80s when the development in Salt Lake first started. So I do think that by 2020, many of the infrastructure in these buildings need to be improved, need to be maintained. And I think for many, this is something that they know and they understand. But I think having the office of, having that office will be key, because sometimes, as we've shared, it's a back and forth between the state, city. No, that's a state issue, that's a city issue. But when you talk to a resident, they don't care whose issue it is, right? They don't know, they don't care. All they know is, I have an issue, I need to get something done. So I think having this office will help, part of that improving government efficiency and improving our government processes is that you go to them, you go with an issue, and they're going to help you navigate. I don't think we have enough of that today. And I do think having one will definitely, in our district, be something that would be very valuable, because I do think, we need to start looking at safety. And many of these buildings, especially ones that my families and friends live in, they need to be improved, and residents have been calling for it for a long time.
Thank you, Jacob. Radiant, your answer, please.
Yes, absolutely. No matter if it's the state or the city, we all have a stake in it, because we either live in one, or we have family who live in condos or apartments that really need to have their infrastructure, their fire systems. I'm looking at my fire system right now as I say this, checked up on and updated and improved. And even with the width of our staircases, am I able to get my neighbor, assist my neighbor down in that way? And I support the office, creating the office of an ombudsman office, because that will create and designate neutrality, and to help resolve issues between the multifaceted issues that will come up. And once again, the state and the city is not always going to have all the answers, nor can we just create these answers, but this is how we can advocate for fair processes and fair decisions for our residents and neighbors here.
Thank you,
Thank
Radiant.
you.
Thank you very much. Ryan, your answer, please.
My answer is yes, fully support it. And going back to the word that Radiant used, the process. By having this office, we could have a particular process for homeowners, condo owners, to really advocate for something that particular developers or property management will not address. And so we can use this particular office to look at the necessary livable and safety regulations that are needed, the bottom line basic things that we need in all of our housing units, and then start advocating for those that in terms of development, sustainable development, how do we ensure that the people can live here for many years? And this office can operate as a source of checks and balances between property management owners and residents.
All right. Thank you very much, Ryan. All right, starting with Radiant, please answer Rick Tabor, who has today's final question.
Okay, everybody, take a deep breath. One last one. So I mentioned, so I was a Navy hospital corpsman, field med, and since that time, so for 45 years, I've been a licensed mental health clinician, and I've been a first responder. Emergency response is kind of my thing. So this question, so I've been a part in Seattle, King County, the crisis response team. And here, when we moved back home here, my wife tried to also get certified, and there were nobody in her class, and they had to merge classes. It's a voluntary program that's really important to the community, because as you know, when a catastrophe, a crisis hits, it could take a while for responders to get to you, and we're going to have to rely on our neighborhood to help out. So my question is, big one, considering the COVID pandemic that we're dealing with, potential of island emergencies like hurricanes, floods, landslides, missile alerts, what are the current emergency response protocols and your recommended safety plans for your district? And we'll start with you, Radiant. Yeah.
So the current emergency response is, I don't know if the word abysmal is the best word for abysmal, but like there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of areas where not all the community emergency response access and access to programs are not available for everyone. not even if you're trying to look for it. And so I think the programs that we need to invest in from the county, especially in concert with the city, as well as the American Red Cross, as well as with the federal agencies and just everybody, is to ensure that we can provide, I don't want to call it a phone tree, but I'm just going to call it like a phone train tree, whatever, just so that we can get all these informations out. We need to make sure that we remember that there are people who are seniors that are living alone, people who do not have access to Wi-Fi or even a phone or more, and just need to make sure that we are reaching out to these persons. And that's the type of program that we need to invest in, is an antiquated system that will reach to every single person. Thank you.
Thank you, Radiant. Ryan, your answer, please.
Thank you, Rick, for that question. And a super important question because our community is not ready and we don't have particular policies in place to ensure that low-income individuals get access to those services. One thing during this current COVID pandemic that I've been questioning for a lot, is why are we putting houseless individuals in hot tents in Key Lagoon? Is that the best that we can offer human beings when we have empty gyms, empty cafeterias that could have been used for shelter, and the recent purchasing of the building at Ka'ahi Street for certain individuals impacted by COVID-19 shows that the city has capacity to do these things, to do these initiatives, to take care of our most people furthest from opportunity. So mental health access is super important. Instead of calling the cops, you can call the mental access helpline. I wish I had that number right now. It's more than 3 numbers, but those services currently exist. And so I encourage community members to think about how do we provide mental health access to individuals, as well as emergency preparedness for low-income communities that really need to be revamped. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Jacob, your response, please.
I think, both Ryan and Radiant hit it on the head again, is that, our district is very diverse. So the needs of our community really varies based off of ethnic background, based off of socioeconomic background. But what I do think is that we need a plan. And I think what this COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted once again is that we are not prepared. It's hurricane season. So more so, I think this question is very timely. And do people know where to go in times of emergency? Do you know if you live in a flood zone? I think these are things that we think about, but yet, we aren't necessarily sure. So I think, making sure that our community knows, having systems in place. I think, for example, the missile crisis was a huge pointer to where, okay, we might need better technology, because how do you press the wrong button? So I think it's really taking an inventory of what we have, what services do we have available, and making sure that our community knows these things. And especially during the times of crisis, we have teams that go out who can cross that language barrier, who can go into these communities and make sure that our kupuna and other vulnerable populations are taken care of. So really appreciate the question, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. All right, well, candidates, thank you very much. Now, starting with Ryan, will you please take 2 minutes each to wrap up, make your final statements to your community? Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Hukoa Council and everyone in this forum right now. I love seeing 3 amazing young individuals from Kalihi and Salt Lake area advocating for the community. I've worked with Radiant and Jacob, and they're both amazing people. I have nothing against them. And whoever wins will ensure that our community is going to thrive and advocate for the most furthest from opportunity. Once again, I'm running because I am a teacher, I am a school leader, I'm advocating for our children. Our children deserve to live and grow and thrive in safe communities. And they also deserve to have safe livelihoods. If we can advocate for our kids, we can advocate for everyone. And I want to ensure that low-income communities get the necessary services they need in order for everyone to feel comfortable living in Hawaii. Once again, my name is Ryan Mandado, and I'm running for District 7, Honolulu City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Jacob, you're up.
Aloha, everyone. Once again, thank you for this opportunity. And like Ryan said, what I always highlight to people is that everybody running in this District 7 race is 30 and under, and I think that's a huge feat and something that many haven't highlighted. I wish they did highlight it. But whoever comes out of this race, I will support them, and I think all of us have the same goal of making sure that our community has what it needs to move forward in the most efficient way possible. But for me, as someone who grew up in public housing, someone who went through many of the challenges that people in our community face, and having been able to overcome it, I bring a unique perspective and a sense of urgency. These are issues, as Ryan said, people are dying, people are struggling, and we need innovative solutions. We need bold leadership, and having worked, like I said, at all levels of government, I bring this perspective to the city council, which I think will be valuable. The next 4 to 8 years is going to be the most crucial, and we're really going to have to make some hard choices. But I think moving forward, we need to do it not for ourselves, but for the future of our community. A community that my family has called home for the past 100 years, and a community that I hope my kids have the opportunity to live and grow in as well. So thank you folks for this opportunity. And my name is Jacob Aki, and I'm running for the Honolulu City Council District 7C. Mahalo.
Thank you, Jacob. Radiant, your turn, please.
Thank you, Kokua Council, to all the members. And I just want to say thank you, especially to my fellow candidates, Jacob and Ryan. And yes, I've also worked with them, and I can't wait to continue working with them no matter the outcome of this race. And I'm invigorated, really, truly invigorated by all of our commitment to our community, because I know that we are showing that together, after this, we can emerge from this pandemic stronger, more resilient, and we will fight for our community. So I am running to prioritize our neighbors who are in need. We've seen with that those with more privilege get more resources, and now more than ever, we have a powerful opportunity to have a more equitable society where those who are most underserved are able to rise up on top. And that is through the improvement of our education and the delivery of services of our city services, and through equitable and accessible ways. I want to make sure that we utilize the resources that many of our families in Kalihi and even in Salt Lake are doing now. And that is through food accessibility, sustainability, and really just empowering that. And I want to also make sure that as we open up our economy, that we have worker protection for our local residents. Many, if not most, of our residents and our neighbors here, from Kalihi to Salt Lake or even to Aloha Stadium, are frontline workers, whether or not they are driving delivery, or at our groceries, or at our healthcare centers. So I think that is where we need to stand together with them. Also, I want to make sure that we have an investment and support our local economies and industries. And once again, I hope that what people see, despite all of the chaos and going through these crises, is that when they see all three of us, that they see that they have us to get engaged and involved, and that it isn't just about three of us as candidates, that is about working with us so that their voices can matter, and that our vision is their vision, and that I ask that you stand with me and stand with all of us, with each other, to make sure that this place, this city, is a place that we are proud to call home and proud to hand to our future. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Radiant. Candidates, I'm at a loss for words. I feel like you're young, and I'm so proud to get to hear you and what you have to say. I feel like our future's in good hands. So thank you for participating. Colleagues, Kokua Council, candidates, thank you for being with us today. As a reminder, what was that, Doug?
I just was saying thank you to everybody.
Yeah, weren't they fantastic? Okay, so this year we're all voting by mail. Traditional polling places will not be opened. So please be sure to return your reply card to the office of the city clerk. You should receive your primary election ballot on or about July 21st and must return it by August 8th. Please do not forget to complete your census forms too. By completing your census forms, We hope to bring needed federal funds for infrastructure, education, and healthcare to Hawaii. We hope that you'll join us in the future at Kokua Council to visualize what's possible when we collaborate to improve our laws, our policies, and practices. Next week, we feature the council member candidates for District 9, which includes Waikele, Village Park, Royal Kania, Mililani Town, West Loch, Iroquois Point, and portions of Eva Beach and Eva Villages. Thank you very much for your participation. It was really a pleasure. Mahalo.
Thank you, everybody. You did great.
Thank you.
Go rest up now for the next marathon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha. Thank you.